Friday Night Funkin' is a rhythm game made by Ninja Muffin, Evil Skater, Phantom Arcade, and Quiet Sprite for the Ludum Dare 47 Game Jam on October 5th, later expanded heavily on November 1st, 2020. And the soft mod is, well, a mod created by ShinyTrex and directed by Dat Davey with some help from a few others, and is a labor of love that went through 2 years of development to produce a wonderful story, expressive music, and scintillating art. So much effort was put into this, and I want to share this incredible masterpiece with you. Here's my review of FNF's soft mod. A quick disclaimer for everyone. Firstly, this video contains spoilers for the story of the mod. If you want to play it yourself, go ahead. It's free, link in the description below. Secondly, this game provides trigger warnings such as implied and physical signs of domestic abuse, PTSD, and mentions of Pico School, which is a game about a school shooting. I've seen people argue that the last trigger warning is a given and shouldn't even be listed as one, but if this mod has taught me anything, you never truly know what someone has gone through without walking a mile in their shoes. Be advised, this mod is not for children. I know they're watching. Please click off. Some minor notes. I've split each quote-unquote week into chapters, since some of them take place back to back. Also, shoutouts to Queasel, who gave me a psychology lesson on PTSD for this video. I have a link to his maps, Celeste maps, in the description below. You should play them. Most of them, all of them actually, are really good. Without further ado, let's dive right in.
And Benjamin, a blue-haired boy with aspirations of becoming an artist.
Let's hope he gets into art school. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of this review, it is mandatory to understand that every chapter contains a narration section. In this case, it does a good job of establishing the context well. For example, did you know that the City of Stars has two classes, the upper class and the lower class? That's a surprise tool we can use for later! However, sometimes the narrator tells us information instead of showing it, which makes it flat and boring. They could have used voice acting and art to their advantage here, but that does take a lot of effort, and considering there was no funding for this project, it might be too much to expect from this on my part. In the opening segment of the mod, we are introduced to Pico and Benjamin. Starting with Benjamin, he's described as a softie, easily hurt because of his history of abuse, and wants to negate that as much as possible. He does not want to be like his parents and wants to care for others instead. He's very hesitant to take a major or direct course of action most of the time, and is also frightened easily. However, he has no issues with taking a minor course of action or looking for a safer route. He hates the abuse that his parents give him and how they forced him into a life that he doesn't want. He wishes to be an artist, but his parents won't let him. This leads him to realize that he wants to live his own life and not the one that his parents fabricated for him, because otherwise he may never get the chance. They also arranged a marriage to boot, but he's gay. And he knows that his parents will never accept him for who he is because they actually really don't know him. He's currently really afraid of his parents and of what they'll do to him now that he's running away. He has a relationship with a graffiti artist named Pico because he's the only positive force in his life that cares for him and also helps him with decision making and coping with the big actions he's currently taking. Pico is the only one besides a few other characters that gives him proper positive affirmation, something which he severely lacks in his home life. Pico is described as a toughie. He can get a bit aggressive against enemies and protective of their loved ones, but also leaves room for them to make their own decisions because of his ideals of living his own life, which is evident from the graffiti. He doesn't put himself in the way of danger, but is willing to risk it all to protect those closest to him. He finds it easy to take direct routes to solve a problem, unlike Benjamin. He cares about Ben and wants to protect him and help him stand up to his parents because he doesn't want anyone else to be hurt by others after enduring a school shooting and witnessing the lives of many people being taken. The only relationship we are aware of currently is his relationship with Ben. He treats him with respect and is looking out for him always. He's extremely alert and aware of the details of the situation he and Ben are in, and is always looking for the next step in the plan. Some important context. In this universe, feuds are settled via rap battles that not only cleverly tie in the gameplay mechanics with the story, but also serve as an important plot point that we will see shortly.
Weeks ago, his prodigal son.
Benjamin! We've been looking all over for you.
Yeah, okay, boomer. The narration segment here is quite decent. It establishes one of the main antagonists, Father Ferris, extremely well. I couldn't phrase it any other way. Father Ferris in the beginning of the chapter puts up a fake persona to please the public, which shows him to be as normal of a person as he's supposed to be, while maintaining prestige in this world. He portrays himself to be a stereotypical American dad, but with a high ego, thinking lowly of the bottom class within a city of stars, especially Pico, because he's ruining the career that he set up for Ben. Driven by status and power, he thinks that Benjamin, being an artist, will stain his reputation and thus wants to force him onto the path of a singer, especially since rapping means a lot in this world. He has a wife who clearly shares his ambitions that he does, which is being at the top of the industry and chain of command. He views Benjamin not as a son, but as a tool that helps him retain and develop that prestige. The rest of the people are mere peasants compared to his prowess, in his opinion. His main goal here is to take control of Benjamin once more and fix his current course into a more favorable one. However, after the first song, he realizes it's going to take much more effort than he initially thought, as Benjamin is a good singer and not so powerless after all, but he doesn't realize that. It is here when we're shown that Father Ferris is a massive egoist, for he then drops the mask and shows his real distaste for Benjamin not being a singer. He also tries to convince Benjamin that art sucks and is a waste of time and regain some control over him, but to no avail, resorting to another song to try and overpower him. After losing once more, he decides to play to his strength and makes a bet that he knows Ben will lose because he thinks he's still at the top. He's so confident that he promises to whip him back into shape. Maybe literally when they get back home, not if. He passes it off as super genuine too. However, he really wants to have his way due to the aforementioned reasons, and so after another loss, he tries to take Ben back home anyway. Ben was never going to lose the battle anyway because his fear of being abused once more drove him to win. But after making a narrow escape, he starts to realize that maybe he isn't so powerless after all, and that fear starts to fade. One more thing to note. Every chapter has an ending narration segment. It serves to fill in the gaps and, in this chapter, further develop Ferris' drive, which helps prove that there is still more danger to be seen and leaves the plot wide open. This chapter, along with many others, ends in a cliffhanger to set up future events, which is really cool and makes the story feel more cohesive and connected.
It's unsettling. It's a spooky!
We once again have a narration segment which has more telling instead of showing. This is by far my biggest issue with the game's story. Like, the narration dialogue could definitely in a livelier way describe two people entering a spoopy house. It's not that hard. Anyway, Ben is slowly starting to become less timid and afraid, and also ends up appreciating Pico more for getting him out of that tough spot, which furthers the two partners' bond. His expressions of doubt are much more toned down as they try to settle in for the night. Pico knows that they may not be safe for long, and thus becomes more protective, which is starting to become a flaw. That's a good thing. If you're confused why, it's because that means there's room for growth and character development. There is a clear increase in aggressive decision making, and personality-wise, he becomes tougher. He's still ever so reassuring and still helps Benjamin navigate through his fears, no matter how small they are. A key trait of his that is addressed is how he constantly gathers info through constant questioning, which can be used to defend the two later. We also see him exert more caution and focus on keeping low. Because this is an AU and originally followed the structure of the main game, we are obligatorily introduced to Skin and Pum. They are minor side characters, so there is no point in going into detail, but it serves as a side story that echoes and reinforces the main theme of you should be living your own life because of how they are choosing to be spooky despite the major backlash they receive, which is remarkably similar to Ben's situation. Because Ben empathizes with them, he feels pity for them, or sympathizes with them, either one, when they ask for a rap battle and wholeheartedly agrees. Notice how Pico remarks on Ben being supposedly fatigued after the first song. This is what's known as foreshadowing, and this game is really great at it, because immediately after the next song, Ben is seemingly transported into this nightmare realm. We are shown this monster, which is a manifestation of the PTSD Ben endured because of the abuse he suffered at home by his parents. This monster is a representation of his fears and doubts, and what his parents want him to be. A soulless puppet drained of everything he loves. A slave to the music, if you will. It's a creative sequence and a very real manifestation of PTSD. Wait, I should explain what PTSD is. Post-traumatic stress disorder is commonly referred to as PTSD, is exactly what it sounds like. It's a disorder caused by an individual undergoing colossal amounts of stress and can be obtained via domestic abuse, something which Ben endured. They can appear as flashbacks or nightmare, but in this case, it's an odd mixture of both. When someone experiences these flashbacks, they may be having an accelerated heartbeat, difficulty breathing, or a feeling of detachment from the body. In this case, whenever Ben has a PTSD moment, he is knocked out cold, maybe also detached from the body. It's a neat explanation on why these random sequences happen, and they end up having a huge tie-in with the overarching story. I should also mention this funny bit where Skid and Pug get kidnapped. Notice how Pico is seemingly desensitized from it all. This could be because Pico's school is somewhat canon, and thus a result of enduring a massacre.
You know how I feel about promises.
Honey, he gay! We have another narration segment which probably includes the most heinous act of the telling so far. In this case, we are told that the couple is trying to leave the city. Why can't the characters explain the plan? That would make the connection between the player and the plot so much stronger, as well as make the story much more lively. But this is the point where my problems with the narration stops and the quality improves, so no more complaints about that. Ben at this moment is calmer and more thoughtful, less panicked, much more smiley and relaxed. Furthermore, most of his fear regarding the situation has left him because he's so close to the finish line. His motivation remains the same, but he's slowly starting to focus on how he's going to live the life that he wants to live. Pico, on the other hand, is much more cautious and alert and more tough in regards to the situation because he fears being further set back and he doesn't want to see Ben suffer anymore. Unexpectedly, we are introduced to Grace, Ben's childhood friend. Personal note, I hate Grace. Not because she's a bad character, oh no. It's more so because she was so hard to get a read on. What would make someone so oblivious and so ignorant of all the facts in the first place? Often, such behavior would stem from her parents, so that would mean her parents have conditioned her to be this way. They have shielded her from the real world just for her to live in the fake one that they set up with Ben's parents in the form of an arranged marriage. She's currently in love with Benny, or at least gaslit into believing she is by her parents, but ignores the fact that he's gay. Ben feels pity for Grace as her parents have practically sheltered her from the real world and fabricated everything just like Ben's parents did for him, including their arranged marriage, and wants her to live her own life like he is trying to do because, despite everything, she's innocent, and Ben still cares about her. Pico has no relation to Grace because of the difference in class between the two, which is neat because they're fully making use of the economical context. Genius. Grace in the beginning acts as if whatever has been foretold by her parents is permanently set in stone, and thus acts in such a way that would reflect the future that her parents described to her. She's careless and lighthearted, but that makes her dissociated from reality and not too good at logical thinking or very aware of her surroundings. She believes that she and Ben are meant to be together, thus, in the wake of his disappearance, she made it a mission of hers to retrieve her future husband at all costs, lest she disappoint her parents. After the first song, she starts to show some insecurity, as if her parents don't treat her equally as well either, but is still oblivious because she's shielded from interacting with real people and thinks whatever love they provide is what love is. Whenever the status quo breaks for her, she gets confused and sad because she assumes that this is the life her parents promised her. After all, it must hurt to have that life be taken away from you when you aren't aware of the other things life has to offer. After the second song, she thinks that everything is her fault because she's forced to blame herself if her perfect life isn't achieved. No thanks to her parents, of course. And fear cripples her so badly that she ends up bawling at the end of the last song. In the end, she realizes that Ben has a point, and now that her fabricated life is gone, she has to figure out what she wants to do with her actual life, if not for herself, at least for Benny.
Hi, Mom. There's my sweet little
Oh
baby.
no, she's hot.
The narration, as I've mentioned before, is slowly starting to improve, and it also fills in the gaps that could be too expensive to animate. Very cheeky, but very clever indeed. Ben is more confident in himself and his ability to say no, and feels more comfortable taking direct actions after the previous events of Chapter 3. His and Pico's motivations revert back to Chapter 2 because of his mother finally appearing and starting to intervene. Pico's trend of protection and aggressiveness increases more because he's concerned for Ben's safety and must watch on the sidelines as Ben's mother tries to pull him back into a bad place of control and abuse, with him ultimately being helpless to do anything at first. Additionally, there's an increase in aggressiveness because now he truly understands the extent of Ben's troubles and is disgusted by it. We are introduced to Mother Marist. Her behavior and motives are similar to Ferrist's because they both view Ben as a source of power and a tool, but not as their son. So in the beginning, she tries to initially appeal to him and convince him the good old-fashioned way. She also has a fake public persona of being a really moneyed murderer who truly cares about her son. But if we've learned anything about the couple, you would instantly assume that this is fake. Do note that she tries to gain Ben's sympathy, but Ben must relate to a person for him to sympathize and empathize, so it doesn't quite work on Marist. Ben doesn't view her in a negative light at first, interestingly enough, almost as if whatever abuse that she has given her was justified in Ben's eyes, which makes me believe she gaslit him into thinking as such. But now, even though he currently can't bring himself to hate her, he doesn't like the way that she is treating him and will not let her have control any longer. He actively refuses his mother's attempts to gaslight him once more on how ridiculous this is, but is still afraid of the abuse that she could give him, which reels him back into a bad place of fear. In the end, however, he stands up to his mother and ultimately understands that she is no better than his father. Pico, at this point, realized that neither of Ben's parents have properly cared for him and is sick of their bullshit and abuse of this boy, which aligns with his motives to see no one hurt unfairly anymore. This makes him properly hate both Ben's mother and father. Pico also appreciates Ben for standing up against his mother because that means he's capable of protecting himself too, which helps him understand that he's not completely defenseless and should maybe back down a bit later in the story. Pico boldly stands up to Marist twice. The first is to call her out on her bullshit. The second is to convince Ben to jump across the limo and leave her permanently, which is a direct action that both Pico and Ben have taken together, improving the trust they have in each other and how they help each other grow in their own unique way. Marist, after the first song, refuses to drop the mask as quickly as Ferris, but ends up doing so towards the end. And this is to hold the illusion of her being a good mother in Ben's eyes for longer, just so she can have that control over him. Yet slowly, she expresses the quote-unquote uselessness of her son and the potential stain it could leave on the family, just like Ferris did. Similar to Ferris, she also expresses dissatisfaction with Pico being in the lower class because she thinks her family is of a higher prestige than everyone else. Upon losing the rap battle for a second time, she gets really angry and starts to show her true colors, even becoming more aggressive than Ferris by directly threatening him with abuse. These actions ruin the relationship between her and Ben because now he realizes that she's no better than anyone else in the family, thus convincing him to leave her. After losing once more, she is truly outraged and is no longer hesitating to directly abuse him. But Ben knows he has a choice and chooses to leave her, rightfully so, by jumping across moving limos while having faith in his boyfriend. This poses a turning point in Ben's arc, while partly changing Pico as well. Not only do they trust each other more after the jump, but Ben now has the guts and will to stand up against his parents and fight for the right to live his own life. This will severely change his personality as well, which we will see in the next chapter. You have to love that cadence.
You little shit!
Okay, you just ruined the public perception. That was a dramatic shift right there. You just fucked up. Fucked up big time. That's exactly how you handle your son right there. The narration segment does a decent job of showing and not telling, which is remarkable. The narration dialogue is improving, which is always a plus. Ben is starting to have fun with Pico and enjoy the life that he wants to live. He becomes mostly unrestricted by his fears and anxiety and wants to become a more compassionate person and more empathetic to others. His only goal now is to cut his parents out of his life and get out of hiding so he can properly live his life to the fullest. But as of now, he's currently trying to make the most of the holiday season. Do note that this is 1 month after Chapter 4, so that they have time to heal from the wounds. Even Pico is starting to warm up and relax a little bit despite the threat to Ben still being very real. This is because he has confidence and a higher level of trust in Ben to protect himself and can finally relax a bit. This also gets rid of his flaw of being overprotective because he knows he doesn't need to do that anymore, and it's nice to see actual story elements in play for once. What a breath of fresh air. Moreover, we learn about how Pico handles compliments, and that's to bounce it back and have fun in a joking way, while still keeping up the tough persona, of course. It reminds me of high school and how I used to joke with others, which is neat and presents more opportunities for Pico to change in the future. Not like he hasn't changed and all, but they seem to be slowly setting up things for another character arc. We are reintroduced to Maris and Ferris due to accidentally encountering them during their annual meet and greet. They haven't changed in terms of morals, but are still keeping up appearances. However, after the first song, they immediately drop the mask and sour the population with their behavior. It's important to mention the meaning behind Ben's sweatshirt. It's been used to cover all the bruises and scars that he's received from his parents, but during the month-long gap where they were healing wounds, these must have been healed too. He is now wearing something different, which signifies how he is currently no longer bound to his parents and is free to wear whatever he wants to wear. After the first song, and after they try to once again reattain control over him through public pressure, Ben is no longer afraid and properly stands up to them both. He becomes super riled and faces them once more to end the conflict. However, the extreme emotional state seems to trigger his PTSD, as after the second song, he is immediately faced once more with the demon inside of him. But Ben is really fed up with this shit and thus commences an epic rap battle against his inner demon, one which he emerges victorious from. Literal chills. It's really satisfying to finally see a character who's encountered so many setbacks and failures to finally stand up and win. Well, one would assume that Ben's story arc is finished here. It's not quite over yet. There's still one more thing that he needs to let go, something he doesn't even realize he still has yet. Before I move on, I want to address something. I called Ben's demon a part of his PTSD, which can hold up in court, but the way he seems to get rid of it may feel as if that's not how it's supposed to work. However, after doing some research and asking some questions, you don't necessarily need therapy to heal from PTSD. It's difficult, but it's possible. You just need a lot of emotional support, something which Pico provides. Therefore, it's completely logical for the story to end this way.
Gay.
We fast forward later in December to a double date with Grace and her new boyfriend Sven. Grace is mostly similar, but she seems to have a better grasp on reality and has also learned to let go of others and move on, which is always a positive. Also, since she's no longer bound by strict rules, she no longer feels pressure to be perfect every time. I'm hoping we see more of this new behavior and more development for her in the future, but I digress. Ben is a completely different person. Now that he's no longer stricken down by fear, he's free to be kind and caring to anyone he wants and live the life that he wants to live. The main theme if you haven't gotten it yet. Moreover, he really has no issues with him standing up for himself at all. Something which is really evident later in the chapter. Also, he isn't wearing the sweatshirt, which makes it feel like he's healed from his past troubles. Sven, in the beginning, is presented as a straightforward, dry-cut man who has an ulterior motive and is looking to pick a fight with Ben. This is because he promised Grace he'll beat Ben in a rap battle just to make her smile. How sweet. He loves Grace and views Ben as an enemy, and thus forces him into this rap battle. It is worth noting that Ben does feel pressured by Grace to continue because he does still care about her and want to see her smile. So for her sake, he continues to sing, even though that scream must have done a number on his vocal cords. Sven loses the first round and is a little upset and angry, but immediately springs into another one. He starts to hate Ben more and more because he's losing to someone who isn't really even putting up a fight. Sucks for anyone who is in that position, so I can understand that. Upon losing the second round, he goes onto a full-on frenzy and reveals his motivations. It shows his dedication to his loved ones, not too different from Pico, which is indeed an admirable trait, but as they say, too much of a good thing is a bad thing, and he pulls out a knife. When Sven attacks Ben, Grace gets concerned for Sven and Ben and even gets a little scared because she wouldn't like it if a large chunk of her life is just gone and she wouldn't know how to recover from that. Moreover, Sven would be out of the picture too, and she would be completely alone once more, which is devastating, as she's still learning to cope with reality, something which Sven doesn't even know the full extent of. Ben knows he's faced worse, and doesn't hesitate to stand up and defend himself. But on a different note, notice how the dye in his hair is slowly going out. It's signifying his change in life from abuse to freedom, and I think it's a well-placed detail. It was taking time for Pico to adapt to a higher level of protectiveness to a more relaxed and casual tone, but when Sven attacks, he instantly snaps back to his old ways. No thanks to a little knife, but is convinced by Ben to stand down and let him handle it. To me, it seems like they've talked about Pico's problems with relaxing and de-aggravating earlier in between chapters 5 and 6, as he quickly stands back. Despite all the battles he's won and all the fighting he had to do in his life, Ben loses fair and square. Sven, upon winning, becomes ecstatic and immediately shares that joy with Grace, something which Ben turns out to appreciate and is happy because of. He turns out to be a cool person when he isn't hell-bent on something and makes amends with Pico and Ben immediately. Grace and Sven then leave with his new goal being to keep Grace happy. Ben losing signifies the end of this chapter in his life and shows him that he can finally let go of the singing past, no longer wielding the power and the perfection of his voice like a weapon, and thus truly differentiating himself from his parents. And so, Ben's story arc is finally concluded.
I love you.
I love you too, Ben.
That's crazy. No! Why? There isn't much to discuss in the epilogue because its job is to establish the new norms that Ben and Pico currently follow. While Pico has become a much more lax person who isn't always living his life on the lookout, we actually don't really know that much about him. So when Pico gets a call to visit his dad, I got really excited because across the story, Pico's change in character has been really straightforward and basic, which isn't a bad thing, but a little nuance wouldn't hurt. Additionally, his motivations aren't that thorough, and I am looking forward to seeing the soft team flesh out his character to establish his actions better. On the flip side, it did take 2 years to churn this out, so I'm not gonna hold my breath for this. I'm fine with this just being Ben's story. The Soft mod does a really good job of representing people who suffer from domestic abuse and PTSD, and how they go on their path to healing. Their message of living your life to the fullest speaks volumes, as this message is open-ended and can apply to various sub-themes in this story. For example, one could view it as a coming out story. Do you really want to live your life in the closet, not allowing yourself to be who you are? Or do you want to embrace yourself fully and unshackle yourself from your own fears, endure the backlash, and come out as a better person? Speaking of fear, fear is also a big factor in this story, which is done and executed really well. Most of these characters are driven by fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being sad, fear of being at the bottom of society. So when Ben overcomes that fear, it feels powerful. It feels like he has truly achieved what others haven't, and that makes him special. It also tells us, the player, to not be afraid of things, or to conquer them instead, or to hit that subscribe button. Oh! But on a serious note, this is a masterclass in using themes and ideas to their fullest. While the narration could use some work, I'm sure that this is one of the best stories in gaming history that I have ever seen, rivaling the work of mass corporations in the industry. I am looking forward to seeing what shiny tricks and /lore that they may cook up in the future. Thank you for watching, and I hope you thoroughly enjoyed this review of the FNF's soft mod.